Assalamu alaikum, I'm Yasin Pons, and this is the Muslims Connected podcast. Podcast for those looking for direction and light. Today we are joined by a legend in his industry for more than 25 years. He got corrected me earlier. But a title that I don't know what the title is because you've shifted titles quite a few times in your career. Assalamu alaikum, Nathier Kasu.
Walaikum salam.
Okay, let's start with the title that you hold now.
Thank you. That's probably the easiest one to answer. And my kids are probably going to watch this podcast so they can actually figure out what I do. So thanks for asking the question. My current role is I'm the Chief Operating Officer for a medical technology company called EMGuidance, Essential Medical Guidance. It's an app for medical professionals and helps them make good decisions at the point of care.
So in any case of emergency, doctors are saying, "Oh, yeah, let me check the app. Let's go to what's needed for this thing," and you guys are there to sort them out.
Yes, and I'd say that most doctors in their training years would have been exposed to the app and they would have been using it as a resource. So it might become quite an ingrained action that they're doing nowadays. But yes, that's pretty accurate.
So it's a life-saving app. So it's got a big responsibility. It's an app that must be up to date constantly and must be, it can't fail at any point.
Absolutely.
So you have a job with a lot of responsibility with.
Yeah, I think that's very true. I think the cost of a medical mistake, it could cost a life. So the stakes are high, but at the same time, very competent team, really talented individuals in the organization. So business is 10 years old, and touch wood, nothing like that's happened to us, and we don't expect it to happen anytime in the future either. So,
that's great. It's also one of those things we know those apps exist, but we don't know who's behind it. We don't know who's the team. So it's nice to put a face to the maker and the guy that looks after everything at the back.
I would definitely not call myself the maker, but the two co-founders that I'm working with, Dr. Yasin Khan and Dr. Mohammed Alwai, they are the actual founders. And I met them very early on in their journey, and about 2.5 years ago, I joined them in a more full-time capacity to actually help them run the business and scale it.
So you're not only on the app, you're also on the business side of the app as well.
That's right. Yeah.
And then how did you get into that space?
Sure, that's a long story. Maybe let's start at the start. So the beginning is after graduating, or actually as part of my internship, I had an opportunity at MWeb, which at that stage was an unknown brand. It was an ISP. This is back in 1997. Some of you may not have been born then. So that's a very long time ago.
Is that when MWeb was still the click?
The big black box and the click.
Yes.
I'm glad you remember it. So yes, that was what we did. I was a call center operator, basically taking calls from people who were struggling to get connected, or they were new to the internet and they were setting up their connections for the first time. They'd call in, and I'd be one of the people on the other side of the phone answering, trying to help them.
Also, everybody was new to the internet. I don't think it was in anybody's homes at the time. They were that wave was the first time people were getting outside information that wasn't a newspaper or TV.
Absolutely. It was very groundbreaking and very new to most people. And with any new thing, it's something that we need to get used to. It's a new language that we needed to train people to understand. One easy example is, and something we always laughed about is, you take a call, you'd speak to someone, and you'd ask them to close the windows on their computer, and then you'd hear poof, poof, poof. And they come back and say, okay, all the windows are closed now. And then you realize that, okay, they misunderstood the instruction.
So people, because we were still new to computers, not only just to the internet, people were just learning, and you had to find a way to teach on a very basic level something that was in front of someone that you weren't there. How well did you have to know the product then also?
I had a cheat code. So really the blessings in my life, and for most people, really come from my parents. So my dad's a teacher. He's always been a teacher for his entire career. And I think my ability to understand a concept and then try and share it with someone else really came out of a home that sort of that held that skill. So I think that was something that came quite naturally to me. And then studying a little bit of the sort of the underlying principles of how the technology works, you can sort of join the two. So if you can relate to someone on the one end and translate and use language they can relate to, and you can also understand the real nuts and bolts of what's going on at the bottom, that I think was a really big help. And I think that's what made it easy for me. It didn't feel like a job. I felt like I went in there helping people. You feel like, wow, okay, very fulfilling. So when people said, I took 80 calls today, I was like, no, I helped 80 people get onto the internet today. That's amazing because their lives changed. They get access to all this information. At that stage, it was groundbreaking being able to go to a search engine. By the way, Google was not even in existence then.
Exactly.
Times. In fact, IMWeb had a portal, a home screen, which had a little search function, and we sort of tried to showcase some interesting websites on the internet that you could visit. Part of the NASPAS group would also showcase some of the other partner brands on there. So that's the very, very early days of the internet. So that was the call center role, and in about 2.5 years into this role, I always found these little side quests. And again, I guess it's all the blessings of Allah, but it really didn't feel like work. And I'd get involved in things that were not part of the core role. And 2 of those things stood out. One was we had this little project where we needed to roll out Wi-Fi hotspots at this unknown cafe called Mug and Bean. Now, you know them today, but back in the very early 2000s, this is 2001 if I'm not mistaken, we needed to roll out the 12 Mug and Beans across
when the
South
muffins
Africa.
were still so big or so.
Exactly. And no one knew anything about the internet. And here we were introducing wireless internet. So you can imagine the kind of sort of hocus pocus people were thinking, like, wireless internet? What are you talking about?
That's like microwaves and brainwaves, and it's like still the conspiracies of the internet and all the extras that came with it. So from what it sounds like, you're also I'll say, someone who just shifts perspective on a problem, where something that's, like you were saying, it could be a bad thing of taking 80 calls, but you saw it as seeing help for someone as well. And now also with the Wi-Fi, where it's something that could be manic, but you also saw it as an opportunity to help others at the same time. Then, so Mug and Bean gets rolled out. What's the next step after that?
Yeah, that's interesting. Then I moved into a unit which was focused on a financial services product. We tried to create our own online bank. It was called ICANN Online. I still have some of the sort of corporate branding because when we disbanded the business, all the staff sort of had some access to some of the branded equipment and some of the branded paraphernalia that we had. And one of the interesting things about that project was, again, think about the internet being this very new thing, Wi-Fi being this very new thing. And I was saying, no, like, do a transaction over the internet. And this was totally mind-blowing that you could access your bank account, do a transaction, and actually have visibility of your balance just connecting over the internet, logging on to a sort of portal.
What year is this, Mark?
This was 2003 if my memory serves.
At that point, I feel like this is magic you're doing. Like it's not, I'll say verified, because you must go into the bank to do banking.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And now you're offering someone a service that will change their whole life.
And we actually delivered the cards to them. So if you think about what we know today as convenience, we actually tried to build that in the very early 2000s. So you'd sign up for this account, we'd deliver your card to you, so you didn't have to go to the bank. And then you could transact with it. So it was quite groundbreaking for its day. But as good as any good idea that comes before its time, we really struggled. And if you think about it, the logic is obvious now, but when you're in it, it's not that obvious. Like, we only had, say, 30,000 people, 40,000 people on the internet, and we tried to build a business on top of a very small sort of target base.
So as a young person with a new idea in a world that hasn't seen anything like it, what were the challenges going forward in trying to get people to buy in?
That's a very good question, and something that we grapple with quite a bit. And I think in corporate, the nice advantage you have is there's often this massive engine behind you. So often you have a big customer base, as an example, that you can build your product on top of. And that gives you a very, very big advantage. So in our case, we tried to build an online bank on top of an audience that were already connected to the internet. But unfortunately, these things are all they're all mechanics, and it's all about scale. And, the numbers just couldn't work out. And after about 2 years of operating, we had to shut that business down. But I think the lessons that we learned were amazing, and we can still apply them today. So we really worked on what is a frictionless experience for someone who wants to sign up, the magic that you speak of. I mean, often that's what technology feels like when you experience it for the first time, like, wow, this is magic. But really, if you really break it down into the core components, we can actually create that magic in many other places if we just put our minds to it.
So it's finding a problem and finding a way to make it easier for people to learn. Is that the core of the problems that you faced, or the problems that you've fixed throughout your career?
It's two of three. So I think the recipe is I would add an extra ingredient to the recipe, and the extra ingredient is the value for the organization. So you may solve the customer's problem, and you may have the technology to do it, but no one's willing to pay for it. And I don't. That's a waste of a resource, right? So I think you need to think about what's the viability of your idea. Are people willing to pay for it? There are some, let's call them huge problems that we would want to solve, but the willingness to pay might be quite low. And one of the things as product managers that we try to focus on is to make sure that we delight the customer. We use technology, but we also make sure that there's a strong business case that can make the entire idea and wrap it up into something that's sustainable and that can actually survive for many, many years.
And also developing a way to get better as well.
Absolutely. If there's good profitability in your product, you can reinvest. So it's a very important concept. If you want to continually evolve, everyone's salaries need to be paid, the infrastructure, everything costs money. Yeah. So if your product's not sustainable, it's going to make it very hard to iterate and evolve your product over time.
So you move on from banking to what's the next step that you jump to?
Sure. I think that's when I went into product management more formally at that stage.
Explain product management, because product management also just sounds like a stock that you realize that we need to buy more of this and we need to buy more of that. What is product management?
Yeah, product management is where you are effectively responsible for, and if you think about the recipe we just spoke about a bit earlier on, you're responsible for being the voice of the customer in understanding the problem space. You're also the voice of the potential technology solution because you understand how you could use technology to solve this problem. And then you also have a very strong capability of forecasting the profitability of a particular initiative or a certain product. So product manager kind of lives in between. If you had a Venn diagram, you'll kind of see like three circles that would basically have this little nexus in the center, and that's really where we would focus. That's typically what a product manager does. If you ask people that are in the field, they'll probably tell you that we're just firefighters and we're like putting out fires all day.
In all three circles.
Correct. Yeah.
And then, so you have to have a deep understanding of all three of those circles. What did you do, I'll say, growing up to learn more about those spaces?
I think the customer-centric nature, I think that again, and maybe again it's my upbringing and my coming out of our household where my mom was a stay-at-home mom, so we got a lot of attention from making sure that we are brought up in the Islamic home, and I love her to bits for that. And I hope when she watches this that she'll hear me say these words. And my dad obviously being the teacher. But I think the one advantage we had was teachers have a huge advantage in that, at about 3-4 o'clock, their day ends. And I had access to my parents. And I think a lot of other kids that are growing up today, they don't have that. And I see that it's a massive gap where kids have many, many hours of almost unattended time and they're not being stimulated and they perhaps don't have I don't want to say direction, but maybe influence from the parents to sort of help them, right? And I think that really helped me be very focused on, if I think about a problem, you think about it from very different angles, because my dad would ask me questions about things like, okay, you took this thing apart, but what did you learn? A typical teacher type question, right? So it would reinforce this, okay, but why am I doing this? Go back to the first principles, like what could you do differently the next time? How could we have got a better outcome? These kinds of things. So I think that really helps you focus on what's the outcome for the customer, for the beneficiary of what you're building. And then on the technology side, I think I was always a tinkerer growing up. I'd be the one with the screwdriver set, taking everything apart, semi-successfully putting them back together again.
I was about to ask, what's the percentage of taken apart to put back together and working? Because that's two different things also.
Very, very differently. Initially poor, and then as with most things in life, you keep trying, you keep experimenting, and you get better. And
then did you become the computer guy in the family?
I did. Not just the computer guy, the appliance technician. I still get calls even today. So I'm still on call for many of my family and extended family. Where you can help, you must. So use the skill, try and share what you know.
At family functions, then it's like, how do I send the photo on WhatsApp? And then you must explain.
That's if I'm not busy with the sound. Yeah. So yes, you're right. So those are the two. And then the third one is, and this is the learned skill. So within a corporate environment, you're exposed to people that have been trained. They're financial managers, they sort of CAs, etc. You work with financially trained people, you work with lawyers and people that are skilled on the regulatory side of what needs to happen. And you basically use them as a base of knowledge you can tap into. They become your subject matter experts. And just like we're sitting now, I'd be interviewing them saying, okay, I'm thinking about this. How could we solve it? How do you see it? What are some of the regulations we need to consider? So more on the legal side. And then on the more business side is, how would we roll this out? Like, can you help me do a 3-year projection? What could some of the revenue and profit assumptions be? What are some of the unit economics that we need to track on a product like this? So these are things that you're natural. So you have to be curious about this stuff. I think if you're not open to that and you're not willing to learn, you're not willing to apply the knowledge, then I think it's going to be quite difficult for you to be able to sort of cover all 3 of these circles.
But I think that's also how you just grow as a person, is to be inquisitive and want to learn. Because any skill, small skill you can pick up along the way, in 10, 20 years you will realize, oh, I can do this thing because I was doing a small version of it back then. And then also trusting professionals.
Absolutely.
I think that's also a very important part of corporate and business, of having the professional people and trusting them to do their job and not question them and crit them too much. Do you get that a lot as well?
Maybe 2 parts to it. I think the healthy questioning is good. And I think maybe for sort of the younger audience, I think one of the things we often struggle with is we have this, let's call it imposter syndrome, whatever words. I mean, there's lots of buzzwords for it. But the reality is that a well thought out question is really worth its weight in gold, because you're forcing the person to think about that question and then engage you. So I think that's very important, and we've got to find our voice to be able to ask these questions in a respectful way, in an appropriate environment, using an appropriate channel. These are all things that you sort of learn over time. And some organizations are, they're probably more formal, some are more informal, so you need to also sort of read the environment a bit. But to come back to your point around the rest of the skill set that you're tapping into, I also think one of the big things that we really need to lean on, and it's not something that you always have in your own home, is that if your ambition is to reach the C-level of any organization, your, let's call it executive presence, again, that's a buzzword, you can Google it, right? But we don't come out of homes where our parents are board members or they are sort of professional people. Now, how do you navigate this? And I think the big advantage that I had was, firstly, in a home where my dad was sort of in the education space. He was a principal, deputy principal. He ran schools, set up schools. So I learned a lot from him in this space, and many of my other sort of extended family members that I could tap into. But I think in the corporate world, you need to find a mentor, a set of mentors. And different mentors are going to bring you different perspectives. And then you got to take what you need from that. It's like you're speaking to me now, and 5 minutes later you'll speak to someone else. It's you then need to take that knowledge and then apply it and see how you can make it useful. So really that's an important principle, especially if you're thinking about a youngish sort of person entering corporate and thinking about what's my pathway.
And I was about to ask now, because you were a young person, I was like moving into very corporate spaces. And we don't have, what was going into corporate like? What are the challenges faced that you went through in corporate?
The challenges they are multifaceted, let me say that. I think one, as a Muslim in corporate, there are many things that we will struggle with as Muslims, because it goes against our ingrained belief system, right? So that's always hard to navigate. And that's often one of the first challenges that one needs to overcome in the corporate world. But I think you've got to stay true to yourself. I think one of the things that people respect is if you are able to articulate why whatever's happening is not acceptable for you and why you can't participate, or why you choose to exclude yourself or not participate. I think it's a difficult but important skill that you need to learn very early on. And I also think it comes down to you need to then know yourself. The old saying that, I think it's Rumi that says, if you know yourself, that's your route to find your Allah, right? So you want to make sure that you know yourself so that you can connect with our Creator. And then you can really live your life as a Muslim, even in that corporate environment, which may not always be suited to what you need.
So you don't lose yourself in that space.
And I think when you're young, that's the risk. I think you just think about it, your first paycheck, now you got some money in the bank, all of a sudden these trappings of the dunya start pulling you here, there, everywhere. So again, I think one of the big things that I saw growing up, and whether you like it or not, when you are young, there are certain things that you want to achieve. You see other people achieve it, and you're okay, I'm aspiring to that, and that's fine. But the trap we fall into is debt.
Yes.
And we are very easily drawn into using the bank's money, someone else's money, and we don't think about exactly how we're going to pay it back. So that's really difficult. The second one, which I think is even more important, is our level of financial literacy as young people. We really need to work on, what can we do to empower our younger sort of generation to make sure that they are empowered to make good decisions. Because it's not about saying, don't do this. It's about saying, understand when you take this path or you make this choice, this is what you're in for. One of the interesting things when my wife and I, we were newly married, and we needed to make a decision around a sort of a debt instrument that we needed to use to buy a house. And we did our research, and it ended up becoming quite a difficult decision for us, because after you figure out what's really going on and you have this little Excel spreadsheet and your amortization table, and you realize, but the price is so much, but we're paying back so much. Like, what's going on here? And at that stage, again, you're a little bit ignorant. At that stage, there weren't many sort of Sharia-compliant sort of options to do these kinds of things. You don't have the rich uncle that can say, here's the money, go buy what you guys
don't worry.
So, I think that's really some of the things that I think challenge us, in the workspace. But if you can find the right mentor that can guide you, because really it's not, the environment's going to be the environment, right? Good people make good environment, not so good people make not so good environment, right? So we got to navigate it. And if we stay true to our values and we empower ourselves and find the right mentors, I think that's really where you want to position yourself.
The recipe for a good life. I wouldn't say success, but for a healthier life at least.
Well, maybe part of it. I'm not sure if it's like a really nice cake or if it's a flop, but...
In terms of financially, because again, when we enter the workspace, again, there's money and we go, I want this. And we want it because other people have it, instead of going, I want it because I want it. So we get lost along the way, as you were saying, of the dunya's traps. So then how do you move on from that space that you were in to the current space that you are in now? Because you studied along the way. I feel like you've had so many adventures. When I was really doing my research, and I was like, this man has been doing things constantly, always busy.
And again, this is one of the huge advantages. You can say a lot about corporate, but I think one of the big benefits of corporate, one example is your professional development is, I wouldn't say taken care of. You still need to take ownership of it, but you've got access to resource. So you can do courses. And it's not difficult. You put up your hand and say, I'd like to do this course for this reason. It's like, okay, that sounds reasonable. And then off you go. It's literally as simple as that. But if you don't ask, you don't get anything. So that's the first thing. Second thing is travel. I really think that once you see a little bit of the world and you interact with your peers that are operating in different regions, in different countries, different socioeconomic backgrounds, different languages. I mean, the group that I was fortunate to work in, we had operations all over the world. So There were some field trips that I went on, and other sort of trips to actually like test out new technology solutions that we wanted to bring to South Africa. So really that was one of the major benefits. It's difficult being away. Some people think travel is glamorous. Without your family, it's tough.
Especially for prolonged periods of time also, it'll take its toll.
Absolutely.
But also, like you're saying, using the perks of your company to travel on someone else's bill is a nice thing. but it's again, studying on someone or on a company's bill, traveling, it's using all that your company can give and not just doing the job that is there. It's always wanting more and pushing for more and pushing even your company and your managers for more at the same time as well.
Yeah. I think you will see it as an investment in yourself. And that's also how the company needs to perceive it. So they are investing in you because they believe that, there's a pathway for your growth. And ultimately that growth, again, if you think about those 3 concentric circles we spoke about earlier on, if you're going to hone your skills on, let's say, the business side of it, and you want to polish up your financial management skills, whatever it is you need, ultimately that's going to help you make better decisions, and ultimately that's going to translate into better profits for the company.
What are some of the projects that you, took or went to go find over that side to bring this side?
Sure. Okay. There's so many, but the one that stands out is something called FON. And again, it has to do with Wi-Fi. I don't know why Wi-Fi keeps coming up, but anyway, it has to. So what we went to go investigate is we found a solution that would allow you to share your home Wi-Fi with passers-by. Now that sounds crazy, right? But it was in a way that was safe without needing any specific login credentials or anything like that. And the principle was, if you shared a bit of your Wi-Fi at home, you could access my Wi-Fi at home because I'm sharing as well. So it was a reciprocal arrangement. So let's assume, the 10 houses down the road, all of them participate in the scheme. As I walk down the road, my phone would automatically just connect to my neighbor's Wi-Fi and the next neighbor without them knowing and not really affecting the experience too much. So the company was based in Spain, and myself and a colleague had to sort of travel to Spain. So we spent some time in Madrid, Barcelona, etc. And then we also had to do some field trips to a few other places like Brussels in the UK, where they had fairly well-developed networks that were already operating, so we could test it and make sure it would work.
It sounds like a great system. It's like a community-based Wi-Fi where internet is shared, and again, you don't need to necessarily rely on like cell phone towers because you've got home Wi-Fi that does that.
Exactly. Yeah.
You say it in my mind. I go, we should have. Why don't we have that? Why are people not using? What were the I'll say the risks that you found with that technology at least?
Yeah. So that specific technology, I think one of the things that you overlook is just the size of the properties. We take it for granted, sort of suburban South Africa, we have quite large properties, and often your own home Wi-Fi doesn't reach the extreme areas of your home. There'll be pockets that don't cover. So for this to work, it works in very well when there's sort of a very dense deployment. So think about high-rise apartment blocks and so on, where the square meterage is quite small, and your access to the network from the street corner is actually possible. But in our case, we struggled with that, and that's probably one of the reasons why that particular project didn't really take off in South Africa. But as you say, sometimes it also like the timing, and also things like as our country develops and things like residential density changes, then all of a sudden and the technology is also going to change, and then there'll probably be another opportunity to do this.
And then did you ever come across technology that was ahead of its time? Something that stood out where you believed, but the world just needed to wait a 5, 10 years before we got there?
So many. I think maybe as an eternal optimist, one of the things we always overestimate is how many people are actually going to want to experience this magic that we've just found, right? And I think it's one of the trappings as well, one of the traps of people that are very tuned into what's happening in technology. That new shiny toy, we just attracted to it. So one of the examples I can think of is I licensed, or in my role, I had to license a piece of software, and this is many years ago. I'm talking probably about 2008 now. We had to license a piece of software that would do monitoring of your home. It's a video monitoring system. So think about a CCTV sort of setup today, but way back 2000s, right? And it was all online. So it was like the magic that we have now, where you can take out your phone and you can see what's on your camera in the front. We licensed a piece of software to do that in the very early 2000s, and that didn't work. It was a brilliant product, but it failed quite dismally.
Failed, but still learned from it.
Of course, the learnings are always there, and I think this is the other thing. I think in a big organization where there's a culture of innovation, you almost need to budget for these kind of failures, right? Because you got to fail forward. I mean, this is one of the things that and Koos Bekker and this is his sort of mantra in the business, and still is. I mean, I've been away from the business for a while now, but he was you fail fast and you fail forward. That was his word. So
you're never failing if you're learning.
No. That's just it. But I do think at the same time, you got to do the diligence, make sure you've done the homework, make sure you've checked out what you're doing properly, because negligence is frowned upon, and it
costly also, because all that to send you away and do the research and come back and then you go, nah, it's not it.
One other thing about corporates is we often think about it, it's my family. It's not a family, as seen. Corporates are teams. And just like any other high-performance team, the person who's slightly off form, they get benched, or they get fired, or they get sent to some other team, sold to
There's no slacking on the team.
There's no slacking.
And then, so you also were in corporate where again, a team, it's also very cold in terms of it's a job. There's no, as much as you want to do community, there's still a profit that must be made and all those other things. You then decided to move on to take a break from corporate. How did that come about?
I think that's a good question. I think at that stage I was at 18 or 19 years of corporate life, and my brother passed away. He was 29, and his wife had just given birth to a 3-month-old son, Abdul Qadir. We love him to bits, and that was really a moment of reflection and introspection for me, not just myself, my parents as well. You can imagine the shock of losing your son. Fit, and he was actually on the soccer field at the time, so no real signs, and just one Saturday morning Allah called him back, and that was a major wake-up call for me. And then what also happened in that same period, one of my trips, I came back, and for whatever reason, net my remote, I left my keys at home, and I came back and I had to ring the bell. So I ring the bell, and at that stage my third youngest daughter, she must have been 3-4 years old at the time. She opens the door and she looks outside and she says, "Mommy, there's an uncle outside." and that broke my heart. It truly broke my heart. And then you start thinking about this whole work-life balance. And you know what? There isn't really a thing called work-life balance, because at some stage you got to realize, like anything else in life, there are certain things when you want to achieve something, you have to put shoulder to the wheel, right? But it's about finding a way to make sure that you don't end up on the wrong side for too long. And when I say the wrong side, I'm sure you can appreciate that, right? Because there are late nights. There are sort of excessive effort on a certain project.
Sacrifices that must be made.
Have to be made.
But also for a certain amount of time.
Absolutely.
Again, getting lost in corporate, people are chasing careers, but not that you shouldn't chase a career, but like losing your life to your job and not living with the people you love. I feel like that's a very common thing with young people now.
Your life is not your job. And I think people need to acknowledge that. Your life is not your job. And it comes back to the analogy of it's not a family. When you underperform, all of a sudden that love that you had is gone, because now the next new thing is there. And now you are disposable liability on the books. And that's the reality. And we have to face up to that reality. And we also have to read the situation to make sure we can move and pivot and do what we need to do. But coming back to the comment around work-life balance, I think one of the things that served me well is your family is your number one priority. And you need to have a very good relationship with your family, because, again, they also have the benefit of corporate life with you. I mean, your salary and the financial rewards and whatever comes with it, it's a package that they're also enjoying. So the sacrifice comes not just from you as the individual putting in the long hours, your family sacrificing along with you. So just make sure that you kind of even it out, and you got to look at that and always check that you're not on the wrong side. And after so many years, I thought, you know what? There was no issue with work-life balance. I mean, we were making it work, but I just thought that, I actually want to just take a break for a while. So I did that. I had the luxury of retiring in my 30s.
Such a gift.
It absolutely.
Also such a mindfulness from yourself to go, I'm going to take this risk. So you did all the analysis of what must happen and then step away from all of that, the rat race.
Yeah. I can tell you what, when you make good financial decisions, and I really have my parents and my wife to thank, they're really very strong advocates of, don't live beyond your means. Debt is just something that we just stay away from entirely. So luckily we were in a situation where we could have quite a long runway with me sort of gardening or whatever I wanted to do, right? And it was also fortuitous in that the company that I'd started, we actually spun that company out. And in a situation like that, you exit at that stage, you can actually negotiate quite a nice exit. So I was fortunate in that regard. And again, Allah provides. So this was the plan for me, and I accepted that. I made dua for it. I didn't want to do another Ramadan on the road like I'd been doing for a few years prior to that. And then Allah answered my dua, and that was that. So I spent...
What year is that?
That was 2014. 2014.
And then that Ramadan was you, I'll say, living your best life in the Ramadan.
Yeah, absolutely.
Being with the family. Yeah. Also being able to make salah on time every time is also such a gift. I feel like, especially when you work a job, it can take you away. So you go, I must make it later. I must catch up on those things, and you miss the magic of Ramadan.
Well, I think the spiritual development, and maybe this is another topic that's very close to my heart. I feel like, we can, all these other stuff we spoke about, they're important, right? But maybe there's another circle that we must cover, which is your spiritual growth. And as a young person, it's the jihadun nafs, the battle of the self, the ego. And often the battles that we have in corporate, many of them are because of ego. And the unpleasantness that sometimes arises because there's a sort of misunderstanding or there's sort of a difference of opinion. Difference of opinion is healthy. In Islam, we taught, there's a structure around difference. That's why we have 4 madhabs. So you think about it like it's the structure's there. We don't have to think about it, but often our egos get in the way. And when we're young, it sometimes could get the better of us. So that's definitely one sort of the spiritual development is something that we must also take care of alongside with everything else. So one of the things that a friend was sort of reflecting on, saying, we go to madrasa as kids. Then when we get to high school, he was like, no, you must focus on your matric.
Yeah.
And we never go back to madrasa. It's a challenge. Like so you have the basics, but you've not actually gone back to really build yourself up and really make sure you understand how you firstly, like, what is your path to your creator? Like, what do I actually need to do? What's the obligation? And another sort of concept which I think is very important, and I think it's Umar that he was very harsh, and he actually forbid people from trading in the market if they weren't competent. So there was a level of, let's say, Islamic sales knowledge that you needed to know about for you to be able to trade in the market. And I think that's so important, whether we're entrepreneurs, whether we're in corporate, we must understand, if we're designing a value proposition, we also need to understand when it's actually in line with our deen or not, and in line with our sharia. So that's spiritual development. There's sort of 2 elements. So when we speak about the skill gap could actually, and you must introspect and figure out whether that applies to you or not. And certainly for in my own experience, when I took the time off, was okay, I want to learn a bit more Arabic, so all these things that you sort of postpone in your life, I could pick those up. So
and then for how long was that, I'll say, learning period for you?
It was supposed to be 6 months. I failed miserably. I think when you're used to that fast pace, after Ramadan, you start itching, like, what can I do? Like, so many interesting problems to solve. Like, where can we go? And you obviously want to travel a little bit and spend more time with your parents and with your siblings and so on. But I then started taking on smaller assignments, and I think one of the benefits of having control of your own time, that's an amazing blessing, because now it's on your terms. I could decide these are my working hours, and I could say, well, I don't work on a Friday, and I work on a Tuesday and maybe on a Wednesday afternoon, or whatever the days were, and you could structure your time and your engagements around that. And that worked out really well for me. I probably was in that mode for the better part of 3.5 years.
It's nice. That's a great gift for yourself to still live, to work and be passionate about the work you're taking, because you're getting to choose what you want. And then also going, I'm going to see my kids, we're going to have fun, and you go back to work later again. But again, it's a lot of self-management.
It is. It really is about self-mastery. It's like one of the major goals that you got to set for yourself is the ability to manage yourself. And I think this is the ultimate test, right? It's the lifelong challenge.
Yeah.
And it's an important one. And obviously within corporate there are certain things that that can help and also hinder along that journey.
And then what's the things you learned about yourself? I'll say when you got to that point, because that's a life-changing moment that you have there, where you get to choose what you want going forward. So now you're busy setting up the type of life you'd like to live, but what at that point did you know or learn about yourself at least?
Yeah. It takes. I think that when you're in the corporate mode, your outputs and your CV almost determine who you are. And now all of a sudden it's a blank sheet. Like you asked me at the beginning of this discussion, what's your title? I struggle with that. My kids are going to look at this and laugh and say, we know, we don't know what daddy does. Like, so this is one of the blessings, and at the same time one of the big challenges of when there's a blank sheet. You literally can, I can restart. Like, do I want to choose a different industry? As an example. And in my case, that's what I chose. I said, okay, so I'd spent most of my life in the media, internet, and sort of telecom space. I thought, okay, let me look around and see what else is there. And at that stage, I had the opportunity to work with other entrepreneurs that were in that space, so I could bring my knowledge of how to build your product and your business and set yourself up for success in many different spaces. So it's in the media space. There was another opportunity in the DNA analysis space, we're working with a very young founder to set up an halal lab for the certifiers. It was around the time of the Ryan scandal. I'm sure you remember the sort of big scandal that we had, and the ability to do DNA scanning and verification.
Wow.
Of a produced item. Like you can basically figure out if what they say is in the box is really in the box. So that was and again, you learn so much. You figure out, how all the system is perfect. Like when you start looking at, what is a DNA sequence? Like what makes one thing different from another? It's down to the blueprint of how we've been built. So it was just an amazing journey. Many other examples. The other example is the medtech company, the EMGuidance example, where I've now joined them in a more full-time capacity. I met the two founders I was doing a product course, and I presented the first module, and they called me up afterwards and said, hey, look, we want to chat to you. Can you help us a little bit? So yeah, that was it. I did a lot of that so I could sort of broaden my own horizons. And in that space, I sort of, okay, these are the things I actually enjoy. I like working with founders. I like working with sort of startup businesses where there's good opportunity, strong fundamentals in terms of unit economics, the market is ready for it, etc. So you'd help people set that up where you can, if there is an opportunity to put in like a seed investment or something like that.
So is it very much then what you were doing then as, I'll say, researching an item and doing all the possible, I'll say, reasons to have it and not have it, and then having someone greenlight those things. Now you get to find those items and then greenlight them for those who are doing the research now.
Absolutely.
So it's come full circle to an extent.
Very much so. And it helps me. So the skills that I've honed over the years, I can use them every day. So it's about using technology, understanding the customer, and then making sure that the business proposition and the value offering for the business is accurate, or as accurate as can be. No one can predict the future, right? But I think there are certain patterns that one can recognize, and you can help the entrepreneurs spot those patterns. So I've been fortunate to work with many of the sort of startup mentorship programs. So, I've worked with a number of them and many young entrepreneurs with really good ideas. We help them sort of sense check, is the market ready for this? Are you ready for it as an individual? There's quite a bit that goes into that. And then how can we help you make this thing a reality?
Because again, we need dreamers in the world, and then we also need the realists who can make the two come together at least. So where are you on the spectrum of dream and the real, or are you the middleman?
You know what? I think it's also something that I've learned. So I think if you had to ask me this, like at the beginning of my career, dreamer, like do anything. And I think that over time, and maybe as you mature, you realize that, there is a regulatory framework, there's a financial framework, there's a reality of the world that you got to work with. And you use it to advantage. So my answer to that question is, I'm still a dreamer, but I also have the context and a little bit wiser in terms of how the world may respond to what we're trying to do.
And then, what advice do you have for someone that has let's say a new idea of technology for the world? What advice would you give them?
So new technology,
like let's say they have an idea for an app.
Yeah, I get this a lot. So it's one of the common questions that I get asked. And what you often find is the quality of our thinking is in some cases very poor. So the first step is, let's validate the thinking behind your idea. Let's understand the underlying assumptions you made, work through those assumptions, make sure that we're not missing a perspective. One such example is I was working with a very young entrepreneur that had a food kitchen app idea. So the idea was a kitchen like your mother's kitchen. You make food every day, right? Why don't you just list your food on this app and we'll just put you into this massive marketplace for home-based meals? Great idea. But it didn't take off. And the simple reason is that, there's a lack of trust. So if you think about it today, when you make a choice about buying something, especially food, like, is that kitchen safe? Can I eat from it? I don't know. So something like that, and that's, over the years, that's what you sort of own, that skill of figuring out what could be the barrier that we need to overcome. So that idea would be brilliant if you can solve the trust problem.
Yeah.
And then there's a few other things, for example, like any marketplace, there's a buyer side, so that's you and I that need food, and then there's sort of the seller side, the kitchens. And you need both of them to be spun up at the same time. Because the most disappointing thing you could have in an app like that is you'd have a whole lot of buyers and there's no kitchens online. Or the other way around, you have all the kitchens and no one buying because you need to market and promote. So it's typical sort of marketplace kind of dynamics that one works through. And again, as a young entrepreneur, maybe you haven't been exposed to that level of thinking yet. So we work through these sort of concepts with them to try and refine the ideas and make sure that...
As you're saying this in my mind, I'm like, what's the other? Like I'm also trying to, because I was thinking of the whole conversation we've had. And I'm like, okay, he spoke about this, he spoke about that. What's the skill set I must use from that we spoke about, so that I can see if there's a hole in the problem as well. So yeah, I got lost in trying to solve a problem that's not my problem. And then also, just what advice do you have for the youth as a Muslim that must go through all of the spaces that's not necessarily made for us, but we have to take up at least?
Yeah, I think the lessons are manifold that one could apply, but maybe if we can maybe condense it to sort of three main things. The one is really about your spiritual development. Don't neglect that. So take on everything you can, all the side quests that you get offered or that come across your desk in the corporate. Even if you're taking 100 calls a day, but there's an opportunity for you to solve a little extra problem on the side, take it on, because it's going to expose you to something else. You're going to learn something new. So always be hungry for learning. And that's a key principle.
That's the first line in Quran that we got.
Absolutely. But we must also make sure that we don't just focus on the growth on the corporate side. The spiritual side is equally important. So we've got to manage both. Second thing is really about getting to know yourself. And if you know yourself, you can master many, many, many things, because it'll give you a sense of what you enjoy doing, So at the beginning, I said, I took 80 calls. Everyone else was maybe not as excited. I'd finish energized after a shift because it was like I was winning the whole time, So if you can find yourself in a situation like that where you're winning the whole time, that's really ideal. You want to look for those opportunities. And often a little bit of introspection and figuring out what's good for you. Mm-hmm. And again, this is where, your parents, your home surroundings, often they can give you clues in terms of, well, we know you're actually good at that. You may not have consciously thought about it, but when you sort of engage the people around you, they can often help you sort of and help you in terms of guiding, in terms of where I want to then focus my energy to say, well, I actually want to go into this direction. So that's important, the second one. And then the last one is just around the financial management and the trappings that we could fall into with that first paycheck. So as you engage this working world, there are major upsides and lots of things. Allah's bounties are endless, so we must enjoy them. But at the same time, we must do it responsibly. So do your best to empower yourself with financial knowledge, be financially literate, and try and stay away from debt. If there's any advice I can leave the young people with today, please, I know it's hard, but if we can stay away from debt, that to me is very, very important, because if you don't have debt, it opens up many opportunities for you in the future. It allows you to build up to something. And if you have an ambition to do other things, if you don't have the noose around your neck, you actually have the flexibility to then make those changes and choices without thinking about, hold on, I got to pay this and I got to pay that. Because once you're in that trap, it's hard. Yes, that's tickets. Once you're there,
it's a hole you just can't get yourself out of.
Absolutely.
And we see it a lot with the youth.
Yeah.
You've left us with such great points. I feel like that's a great place to end it, because I want to go home and go in, listen to this and go over those 3 points that you gave. Shukran again for joining us. I've learned so much from you. Is there anything else you'd like to punt before we go?
No, I just want to shukran so much for the opportunity. I mean, the intention of accepting the invitation was really around trying to inspire the youth. So if one person watches this and listens to this and maybe makes a better decision or empowers themselves or use some of the tips that we just spoke about to try and get them ahead in life, I'd be very happy. And then the last thing I just want to say is after you've succeeded in corporate, make sure that you come back and give back to the community. Because I also think that if we don't do that, the cycle's incomplete. And we really have to make sure that we create opportunities for people like this opportunity you've just given me, and I'm really thankful for that, to be able to share some of these things. And hopefully the rest of our youngsters that are also climbing the corporate ladder and doing amazing things can also give back when they have that opportunity.
Inshallah. Shukran for joining us, Nathier. This is all for the Muslims Connected podcast. I'm Yasin Barnes. Assalamu alaikum.